And Richard, you were on the Daily Express for,
Yes.
for 20 years on the Royal Rota. A new job that you could have got was Harry and Meghan have got themselves a new press officer for the UK. So this is the first time in 4 years that they've got a new comms officer for the UK and Europe. Is it a job that you'd be interested in? Does this mean that we are, God forbid, we're going to have more news this side of the pond about Harry and Meghan now they've got an actual designated communications expert working for them here?
Well, it's really interesting that they're employing somebody, isn't it? Because for quite a while they didn't really want to engage with the UK media. But I think their need to employ a PR over on this side of the pond shows how they've lost the public support over here, and they've lost positive PR, positive coverage in the media. And, I can remember times in the past when some of your predecessors on The Sun used to say that, Harry's so popular, he's, all the women readers would love to date him and all the blokes would like to go out for a drink with him. And the idea that he would get lots of negative media coverage was more or less unthinkable back in those days. And it's been interesting to see how the public's perception of him has changed. Now, you can argue, is that because the media have reported negatively on him, or is that because the media are just reflecting what the public think about him? I suspect it's more the latter. But they need to up their game over here, I think. They've lost public support, and certainly, they've already appointed somebody. I don't think that job would have been for me, but I'd be interested in engaging with them because, I do think that I do think Harry and his father are trying to reconcile. I think with William, it's going to be a much longer process, but eventually, maybe lots of families have disputes, and over time, they can heal their divisions. But there's a big job to be done yet with William. The King, I think, is open to reconciliation, but I don't. You may disagree, but I don't think he's open to the idea that Harry could be a sort of part-time working royal. I think they drew a line in the sand at Sandringham all those years ago now, where they essentially said you can't be a part-time working royal. You're either in or you're out. But it's been upsetting, I think, for quite a lot of journalists to see how the whole royal scene has become bitterly divided and quite toxic. And, to be accused of racism has been really upsetting for a lot of journalists, I think, by Harry and Meghan's supporters. I used to love dealing with him. He was a lovely guy, very funny, loved the fact that he wore his heart on his sleeve. You could talk, you could have a chat with him. I mean, I can remember a bit of banter with him in the Caribbean in 2016 when he'd arrived early to be greeted by the Prime Minister of a particular island, Caribbean island we were visiting, and so came over to talk to us in the press who were there, introduced himself to a female reporter from one of the British papers who wasn't a normal royal correspondent, then started making... joking at my expense about, oh, you haven't been up all night drinking like Richard Palmer then.
Had you been up drinking all night?
I hadn't.
Oh, okay.
And I told him, how very dare you. How very dare you. But I loved all of that. And there was a colleague on another paper. He remembers it slightly differently, but the way I remember it, Harry sidling up to him saying, I see you're still writing... Well, nonsense. Nonsense wasn't the word he used, but you could deal with all of that, yeah. And but also, I can remember going to Colorado to cover him visiting the Warrior Games, which was really the the prototype for the Invictus Games, and we had a press reception where he was essentially saying to us, I'm thinking of setting up these games for wounded troops. Do you think your editors would support it? And everyone said, yeah, I think so.
So he was actually asking journalists for their opinion on how he should operate, or what kind of projects he should run.
Yeah. And of course, the British press did give a lot of support to that. In fact, I got a letter from the sort of organiser of the first Invictus Games thanking me personally for my support for that. At the same time, I can remember him getting really quite agitated on that trip about something he'd read in Heat magazine. And we were sort of, why are you worrying about what's in Heat magazine? They haven't got a royal correspondent. But he sort of saw the media just as one thing. And to him, there wasn't that much difference between a royal correspondent and somebody who'd never reported on him before. And he was also very worried about, I can remember him being worried about, the readers' comments underneath a news website's, not my current that point website, but another newspaper company's website. And I don't think anybody could really understand why he was micromanaging things and why he was so agitated about things, because clearly there was a lot of nonsense said and written about him at times.
Well, there's a lot of news written about him at times. That's probably why they need a UK press
officer. There is, yes.
But the news, well, the last couple of things that have been happening with Harry that draw my attention is this visa issue. So there was this think tank in the USA that says we need to know what Harry said on his visa application, whether he admitted taking drugs, whether he got preferential treatment to actually come into the USA and have a visa because he's made all these confessions in spare. He could easily just, this is a court case now, but he could easily just, he could show his visa application. He could prove he isn't lying. What are your thoughts on what he's doing there?
Yeah, well, he clearly doesn't want to. He wants to maintain the confidentiality of that whole process. And I don't think it's really clear, certainly not clear to me, on what basis he is living and working in the US at the moment. No. Does he have a green card? Does he? It's not clear. And the US government clearly doesn't want to disclose all those details either. I think it's a problem for him, but it also illustrates another problem for him, is that he and Meghan have become very divisive in the US as well as over here. Clearly they have their supporters over here as well. But in the US, it seems to be quite political. And although there are obviously exceptions to the rule, and I'm aware, I know people personally who are exceptions to this, but generally Democrats seem to be more sympathetic to him, and Republicans really don't seem to be keen on Harry and Meghan at all. And if Donald Trump gets back in this year, then that's another potential problem for him, because Trump doesn't seem very keen on Harry either.